What I have understood is that a lot of times, even though I respect all rescuers and I know most of the time these intentions are coming from a good place, but somewhere along the line, a lot of the intentions also get sort of misguided. I know a lot of people who are just doing the work because they want recognition. A lot of people are doing the work because unfortunately the funds can be also used in a way that cannot really be proven. So even though I am somebody who fundraises themselves, it is very disheartening when funds, anyways, people do not donate for animal welfare,
Hmm.
but when a few handful of those people do donate and the funds are being used in a wrong way, it very negatively affects the work that is already being done at a very limited scale. Secondly, a lot of these rescues, even though a lot of people have come up and are working, the number of people working versus the number of people that do not like animals are unfortunately still a very disproportionate amount. And no matter how many people that continue to work, I think as long as a basic animal affection and taking care of community animals or just understanding about them is not included in our education system in some way or the other, this will continue happening. We do not have the basic knowledge we should about animals around us, and India should have a very specific plan or a guide to include this in the education system, um, because the western countries do not need it. They do not have animal community animals. They do not have the same amount of human animal conflicts that India has. So we need some way or the other to teach people how to live with these animals, and how to behave better around them or with them.
I've had the privilege of knowing Kirtana for a while now and observing her journey throughout the pandemic period. It has truly been an inspiring experience for me to witness her unwavering dedication and ongoing efforts for these community animals. Her boundless passion and selfless love for these animals compelled me to invite her onto the show. During our conversation, we explored her organization Coexist with Positivity and delved into various aspects such as adoption, rescuing, sterilizations, and much more. This podcast contains some golden nuggets of education that I am eager to share with all of you. I sincerely hope that you enjoy this conversation as much as I did while recording it. Kirtana, thank you so much for being on Hope. Honored to have you on the podcast.
Thank you for
So,
inviting me.
before I start with anything, I'll just
Yeah,
tell you a very small story.
sure.
So, during COVID, I've been following you, particularly during COVID, I used to see a lot of your posts about raising funds and about rescuing animals, right? So that
Yeah,
was also the time when I started writing blogs and started exploring
yeah.
wildlife in general. So first of all, a big thank you, because I used to look up a lot that there is a person I know who is doing such a great
Mm.
work on the field rescuing dogs and stuff. So I used to talk to Tanmeet
Right.
about it as well. So first of all,
Mm.
thank you so much for that.
And thank you for doing the same work, but on a different level, and trying to reach more people out there.
Thank you. So before moving on to the more educational and stuff, I would love to ask about the name Coexist with Positivity, particularly because positivity, the way you have written it, PAW, is in itself very creative way. But I feel that adding coexist to it adds much more meaning and depth. So I would love to know your viewpoint on that.
So how that name came forth is that I was trying to sort of play around with the words, and also the fact that Instagram already had a lot of animal welfare pages, so that was one of the factors. But what struck me about the positivity part was obviously there was the PAW for the paw, and I was working not only for dogs but cats, and I have also worked with rescuing turtles. So like I thought that sort of included all the aspects, and if I just said maybe there were options for dogativity and all of that, but I wanted the page to be more inclusive, and it should reach out to all sorts of animal welfare workers. For the coexist part, how that came to me is that I really realized that during the lockdown, a lot of people had a lot of hatred towards animal welfare workers, because every time I would post something, people were frustrated. They were like, why are you not working for humans, because humans are suffering. And what I felt at that point is that because human suffering was a lot more highlighted in the public and in the media, and obviously people were going through a hard time, um, we had such a anthropogenic view that humans are at the top of all of this, and only we need all the attention and care, and everything else doesn't matter, everything else can take a pause, and all the resources should be redirected to humans. That is when I realized that the idea of coexistence is really missing in the public, and people have to realize that animals and us exist together, and we have been, because all of these community animals play an equal role in keeping our cities clean, and they go through the garbage, and they help in because our waste disposal systems are not great, right? So they help take away a lot of that waste by scavenging on them. People also need to understand that fact. So that is how the name Coexist came. I was really frustrated with the fact that people could not understand how important they are. So yeah.
So, your first post was on 19 July 2020, right? And I'm
Yeah.
assuming that that was the time you started as well. So the
Yeah.
first post was about the 8 puppies you rescued, and there was a really impactful story behind it, how you rescued them, vaccinated them, stuff,
Yeah.
and 2 of them survived. So I would love
Yeah.
to know about that story as well.
So, my first animal rescue ever that I did was when I was 11. So, I used to go to this summer camp, and there was a green colored bird that had fallen down from the tree, and the security guard at the facility had kept him in a small makeshift cage. And I was looking at the bird. I was very fascinated, but I had never had experience with any animals, and I was extremely petrified of cats and dogs both. And also because how the it also attributes to the fact that how the Indian society sort of puts it in your mind that don't go and pet that animal, don't go and touch them, they are going to bite you. So that sort of cultivated that mindset in me where I was scared. But I was very fascinated by the bird, so I went and I was petting the bird, and the guy said to me, "Do you want to take it home?" I was extremely anxious because obviously I did not know how my parents are going to react, but something in me said, okay, let's do it. Let's take the bird home. And so I did, and my mother was very, she was very accepting of it, surprisingly. She did not say anything. We had, my parents had a colleague who was, working with wildlife SOS, and somehow my mother knew that. So she called him over and she told that this is the case. My daughter has gotten home an injured bird. We do not know what bird this is at the first place. So we don't know how to take care of it. Do you know any resources or any way that we can, help the bird? So that is how we got connected with wildlife SOS. I was very young. I was 11 at the time, but I started following and their journey. I started to research, and I saw that there are people out there, who work with animals, and you don't need to have a pet to work with animals. You can, start working in other smaller ways. So over the years, that one bird rescue, it turned out to be a green pigeon, by the way. And so that one rescue then became 2 or 3 pigeon rescues. Then I also called them because I once found an eagle hanging by a thread of a kite after some festival. So that happened. Then I went to we used to have these rescue fishes. So my mom had a friend who was going away from the city, so she gave us her aquarium, so we had it. So I was going to buy some fish food, and I saw the pet shop having a turtle. And I somehow knew, because I was following the wildlife SOS page, that having a turtle or selling a turtle was illegal under the Wildlife Act in India. So I just sort of asked the guy, why is he selling the turtle? And I asked him about it, and he got extremely anxious. And he was like, if you want to take it for a cheap price, you can take the turtle home. And the way he was handling the turtle was very disheartening. So I sort of convinced my mother, and we got the turtle home. So then it became a turtle rescue. Then I rescued cats in 2016. And my first ever dog rescue was when I started my undergrad, and our campus had a lot of dogs which were very they were completely famished. They did not have food resources. They were not sterilized, not vaccinated. So that's how I started working with dogs. And finally, I started working and feeding community animals on a large scale when I rescued these 8 pups. And that's how Coexist started. So during COVID, we had actually recently gotten possession of our new house in Faridabad. I originally used to live in Delhi, but we started traveling there. We went a few times to check the construction and the pace of the work that was happening, and that's when we came across these dogs. And at this point, my parents were obviously also sympathetic towards animals, and they actually spotted the puppies and the family together, and they said that can we do something about them. So it started as a small initiative to trying and feeding that family, but then we became more attached and we wanted to obviously help them more. So I started connecting with other rescuers and seeing how I could work more and reach more people, and that is why I created the page for fundraising and connecting with other rescuers.
So I feel like very important point you mentioned was that how what we are told is that any animal you go to will attack us, obviously. But
Yeah,
in the previous podcast I did with Steffi John, so she's the education officer of Madras Crocodile Bank. So even she mentioned how parents need to change the view, and
yeah,
they need to change the language basically. In spite of saying that it's going to bite you, it's aggressive, they need to say just maintain a distance. It's going to be defensive, rather than
yeah,
me saying it's going to be aggressive, it's going to bite you. Like it
yeah,
creates a negative image in the minds of the children who are
yeah,
by nature very curious.
exactly.
Like even in your case, the turtle was very curious to you. That's why you got it, rescued it,
Yeah,
and you were in touch with people who told you that it's illegal to keep like turtles.
yeah.
Obviously, that at that time, Indian roof turtles were the most common ones sold in the market. I would
Yeah.
confess that even I had two Indian roof turtles, and as
Mhm.
soon as I got to know that they are illegal, that particular night, my dad just vanished them. So gave them back to the pet owner, whoever had them. They kept them
Mhm.
for a month, and even they gave them to a wildlife organization who used to work for rehabilitation and stuff. So they
Hmm.
finally got rehabilitated, and I
Okay.
hope so they got released. So moving on, I'm like I have read your like almost all your posts earlier as well, and during the research as well. They were
Mhm.
centric about adoption, rescuing, feeding animals, sterilization, and vaccination. First
Yeah.
of all, talking about adoption. Like adoption has been a thing that about adoption, my views have changed a lot in the past as well. And I won't ask you why adoption is important, but I would love to ask you like what will be the consequences if the adoption rates fall.
Mhm. So yeah, there are two three different issues here. So a lot of US based shelters, a lot of them are kill shelters. So that means if that when the adoption rates fall down, to make space for the new dogs and cats that are coming in, automatically the aggressive ones, the so-called aggressive ones, the older ones will get euthanized, because obviously shelters have limited number of resources. But in case of India, a lot of most of our shelters are not kill shelters, which means that they usually do not euthanize to make space for new cats and dogs. But then what happens is that they are cramming up more cats and dogs as adoption rates fall. Because honestly what happens is that adoption rates fall but abandonment rates never fall down.
Hmm.
So people keep on abandoning, and they have limited number of resources, they have limited number of staff, very little funds. So they keep on cramming them up into small spaces, and ultimately what happens is that they become breeding grounds for diseases and infections. It is not the fault of the shelter staff or the rescuers, because genuinely we don't have enough resources to deal with so many animals that are getting abandoned. So that is one of either of the two issues. Either we convert into kill shelters and then we euthanize and make more spaces, or we keep cramming them up. So in both of these cases it's the animal's loss.
Right. Like going through Instagram page as well, there were a lot of adoption tips as well. And even I went through the adoption form that you have. It was a great form, particularly just saying because I haven't seen many like adoption forms that are so detailed. Like it was a very detailed screening of how the pets are going to be kept, the place, the
Yeah.
location. I feel that plays a very important role. So what are apart from the very general tips that a person should take care about while adopting an animal?
So one of the basic ones is that you need to remember that they are just going to be like a child. So they are going to have various sicknesses. They are not going to come in a perfect shape. Even if I give you a completely healthy rescued animal, a new environment, stress of new people handling them, new kind of food being served can all contribute to illnesses. So a lot of times what happens is that because during an adoption you have somebody to fall back on, you have an organization or you have a rescuer, people are very very eager to sort of test their adoption success rate at a very quick pace. So they adopted today, they want it to be a success within the next 1 to 2 days. If that does not happen, they immediately want to return back the animal, which is I feel not the case when people go and buy the animal, sadly, because then they have paid a price for that individuals, so they want to keep at it and want to try for longer. I'm not saying that bought animals are not abandoned, but in this case the accountability is less. So first of all, people need to understand, even though they have an organization or somebody to fall back on, the accountability needs to be there. You need to give the animal enough amount of time to adjust to the new place, and you also need to be ready to take care of them if they fall ill. So have that sort of financial cushion for yourself in case they go through some injury or they fall sick. You can't then go around saying that I cannot take care of this animal anymore because they are sick. That's not how it happens when you adopt a child, or have a child of your own. That is one important thing. Secondly, you need to understand that they are not objects. Like when you move houses, you move countries, you move cities, or when you have jobs, you cannot just abandon them back on the street or on us and go away. And the more smaller things are very breed or animal specific. So in case of cats, cat rescues are still very recent that are happening around India. So India did not have a lot of cat adoptions happening a few years ago, and cats were not very popular pets in Indian households. But now that people are more households have working individuals, and maybe both the partners go for work, so cats seem to be the more choice of pet because they can stay alone for longer period of time, and they do not require walks. But with cats, the biggest issue we face with adopters is that they are not ready to net their houses. And most of the people right now live on high rise buildings, and they have houses on 10th, 11th, 12th floors, which are extremely risky for cats. People have this misconception that cats have extremely good alignment when it comes to height, and they, even if they fall down, they are going to survive. But that's not mostly the case with domestic cats,
Hmm.
because they have been literally hand raised by us. They do not have any idea of the outside world. For example, in a good case scenario, they fall down and they survive also. What happens is that immediately they'll try to run away. They're not like dogs that they're going to wait
Right.
at a place. Once they run away, it's impossible for them to trace back their home or to come back. It becomes extremely difficult for rescuers to then go around and search for your cat if you lose them. So netting is extremely important for a cat based adoption. For a dog based adoption, what I would say is that people don't understand sometimes that walking and leash training requires extreme amount of patience. Because even if I have leash trained and walk trained a dog and given the dog to you, you are not the same person as I am. Maybe you don't have the same amount of strength that you're walking the dog to, or you are not giving the same exactly the similar command. So you need to sort of uh, reteach the animal, because it's in a
Hmm.
new household, again a new environment. Maybe I used to walk the dog in a park where it did not have so much of stimulus and distractions, but maybe you are walking the dog in a society where it has 100 other distractions. So all of these things need to be taken care of, but at the core of all of these things is that you should have the welfare of the animal in your mind and patience in your heart, because these are living beings at the end of the day, and you can't just discard them as soon as they are inconvenient to you.
Right. Another factor with adoption, I feel, is the color of the animal. And you've talked in one of the
Yes.
posts about a syndrome named the black dog syndrome. I would love to
Yes.
know from you what's black dog syndrome and how does
Yes.
it negatively impact the adoption rates?
So, not just in India, but shelters across the world, and there are well published research and articles on this about not just black dog syndrome, but even black cat syndrome, wherein all these darker coat colored dogs and cats are usually passed over for the lighter coated counterparts. So if I also have a post on this, if you would ever check it out, there was a sibling that I was fostering at a time where one of them was a tortoise shell,
Hmm. Hmm.
and the brother was a white and golden mix. And I had so many requests just to adopt the male kitten, because they wanted the lighter colored kitten and they did not want the sister along with him. What happens is that because of this, more number of black cats and dogs are automatically euthanized, or they
Hmm.
end up living in shelters almost all of their lives because they are not adopted. In India, sadly, it's not just the black cat and dog, but also the tortoise shell dogs and cats, which have an even lower adoption rates than these two. And because of these, sadly, we have to try our best to click as attractive pictures as we can, and sort of accessorize them and put them out there, sadly, like an object, so that people at least pay some attention to their posts.
Right. So since August 2020, we have sterilized 500 plus dogs, if I'm not wrong, right? So first of all, a big congratulations on that. And
Thank you.
secondly, Why sterilization is so important among dogs?
So, not just dogs, but all community animals. There are not enough facilities, I think, that are or centers that are set up on sterilizing larger animals like cows and buffaloes. But we have so many of them out there that I think that sterilization on that should also be actively considered by more organizations. But right now, I am working more on cat and dog sterilizations because these are the two more domesticated animals where human animal conflicts are at the highest. Why dog and cat sterilization is important is that, first of all, it not only benefits the animal that you are sterilizing, it benefits the people around. Because a lot of times the argument that I am given is that we never did it in our days. Like, a lot of people would be like, why are you doing something unnatural? It is unfair to them. But the thing is, there is nothing natural anymore about our societies. Everywhere you look, there are constructions happening, and there are just streets filled with automobiles. So these animals literally don't have anywhere to go to. So they don't have a hiding space. And what they're doing is they are just scavenging through all the garbage and waste that we throw. So what happens because of that is that they come more in contact with humans, and the human animal conflicts increase. And interestingly, mind you, the people who object to sterilization most are also the people who do not like having dogs and cats around them. So it is a very conflicting view that these people have. They don't want anything unnatural happening, but they don't want anything to do with them. They would not even give them one meal a day. So the only humane way of controlling the population is sterilization. But a lot of people, like, I am working in Faridabad for now 3 years. Most of the resident welfare associations would rather pay money to an unmarked van, get catchers in the middle of the night, catch these dogs and throw them away in a forest, then spend 500 to 1200 rupees on sterilizing a dog. So they are ready to do illegal things, but they are not ready to contribute to a legal initiative. So that is one of the biggest problems. The human stopping, like, overgrowing of the population can only be done through sterilization. Secondly, what happens is India has one of the highest level of rabies cases. When you control the population, you are controlling the rate of
Hmm.
rabies being spread, because not just the number of dogs and cats are reducing, but also all of these dogs and cats that go for sterilization are also given a shot of anti-rabies vaccine. So they are literally being immunized
Hmm.
against it. So even if they bite you or they scratch you, the chances of you catching rabies go down exponentially. So these are some benefits which should definitely be considered. And also, more resources need to be allocated, because at this point all the rescuers are raising funds on their own to do it, and it's extremely expensive. Some municipalities I know have resources for doing dog sterilizations, but there is absolutely no resources like that available for doing anything for cats.
I personally feel that at the core, people need to understand that we don't have space even for people to live. So how we can
Exactly.
accommodate dogs and those animals
Yeah.
and those dogs that people are not even willing to take care of. So what's the point of
Exactly.
increasing their population?
Exactly. And nobody comes forth when car accident cases or
Right,
anything
right.
happens to animals. So I feel that sterilization is the only way that you can also reduce these accidents that happen for animals, and also reduce the number of cruelty cases. Because the more these animals get in touch with humans, the more frustrated a human being is, the more they'll take it out on an animal. But when the animals are not there around, so it just reduces the likelihood of anything like that happening.
Yeah, like even in cases of wild animals, people just cluelessly talk that we need to increase the population of this and so animal. They don't
Yeah.
realize that we don't have the forest cover to accommodate them. Eventually, they're going
Exactly.
to go in the villages, hunt for people, is going to
Yeah.
create a conflict between them. So they need to
Exactly.
understand that it's important to strategically increase the population if we want
Yeah.
to.
Yeah.
So moving
Exactly.
on to a bit more intense stuff. So
Yeah.
I'm a complete no against many festivals and cultures that promote animal cruelty. Be it a Yulin dog
Yeah.
meat festival in China, be it the Gadimai festival in Nepal, be it the Nag Panchami in India as well. So you
Yeah.
have been a person who have worked a lot on field. So
Yeah.
in terms of community animals, have you witnessed any festival or any ritual in general leading to animal cruelty?
So, in terms of festivals that do not specifically focus on animals but are harmful to community animals, I would like to cover a few of them which I have had issues with as a community animal worker. First of that is Holi, because people get extremely intoxicated on the streets and they go around deciding that it is a great idea to color the dogs and
Hmm.
cats. And these colors are extremely toxic because they're obviously not organic or friendly to these dogs and cats, and they lick their fur to clean themselves, which can lead to so much of issues. I have had to take in dogs for emergencies because they were extremely salivating and disoriented and almost fainting because of licking all the color on their bodies.
Hmm.
Secondly, Holi usually comes around a time when it's still the colder months in North India. And when people are playing Holi, they also keep throwing water on these community animals. And a lot of them catch hypothermia, which is
Hmm.
deadly if it is not taken care in time. And lastly, all of the balloon throwing that happens in Holi is a very big choking hazard for birds, for cows, and for any animal that can ingest it by chance. Secondly, is the worst of them is Diwali, because a lot of us lose our community animals. It's so loud, and a lot of noise pollution happens during Diwali because of crackers. So not only the air quality is extremely bad, but because the noise scares them so much that they go
Hmm.
into hiding, they get chased out, they run out of their territory and can never find their way back. And also some people again get extremely intoxicated and tie up the crackers to the
Hmm.
tails or the mouths of dogs, and we have had a lot of these cruelty cases come forth during Diwali. Lastly, is one more which is not usually very widely covered, but I feel the kite flying that happens on Sankranti and Independence Day is also a huge issue for birds, because people do not go into open grounds and fly kites anymore. They just fly kites out of their windows and their terrace,
Hmm.
which has a lot of hooks and crooks around their buildings, and they have a lot of plant cover around residential areas. And usually, when you're flying kites and you're competing with each other, the threads are bound to get tied on these trees, and when that happens, a lot of birds get tangled up, their feathers get cut or their legs get cut, and they end up dying because of that. So I don't have anything against these festivals because none of them are inherently dangerous or redirected towards an animal, but there is a responsible way for celebrating all of them, and considering the fact that again you should coexist with other animals
Right.
and other beings that are there around you. The earth doesn't belong to only humans, so yeah.
So, talking about another very dark phase for every being on this planet is the pandemic COVID-19, right?
Yeah.
So, it wasn't only a very disturbing phase for human beings, but animals as well.
Yeah.
Talking about dogs, what I have noticed, and it was a question out of curiosity, that an animal who has been witnessing tens and thousands of human beings every single day on the road, suddenly, boom, no one's around. So,
Yeah.
being on the ground, have you witnessed any behavioral change that would have happened due to this?
I am sure it took a lot of psychological toll for a lot of these dogs, and even cats who were domesticated and were used to being petted by their, rescuers and caretakers. Because a lot of caretakers I know fell terribly sick themselves and could not go out there and take care. Also, lockdown sort of brought in restrictions because of which it restricted their movement. So a lot of rescuers and community caretakers could not step out of their house or could move around to go and distribute food or pet their animals. So definitely it caused a lot of psychological trauma to both rescuers and animals alike. Apart from that, definitely a lot of these animals have learned to live in close contact with humans, so their food sources were the garbage that we were throwing out, so they were scavenging through that. But suddenly no one was there on the street, and suddenly they didn't have any food resources, because of which a lot of them were starving. And that is one of the reasons why I started my initiative in Faridabad, because the areas around greater Faridabad are still very new to construction and residential areas, and most of these dogs are very famished and they don't have a lot of food resources. But how the population came to be is that they usually travel with construction workers.
Hmm.
But when COVID happened, these construction workers went back and these dogs were just left behind without any food or resources for themselves. So COVID definitely caused a lot of mental trauma and distraught to these animals.
So lately, what I have understood is that working with animals requires working with humans as well, right?
Yeah.
So during COVID, there was a rise in the animal cruelty cases as well. Like it has
Yeah.
been horrific to hear about rape and molestation cases among dogs as well. I've
Yeah.
heard about like iron rods being inserted in their genitals, blunt
Yeah.
objects being used to poke their eyes out, It has been
Yeah.
like terrific. But I would like to ask you that working on the ground, working with people as well, why do you think like COVID-19 led to an increase in animal cruelty cases?
So, while I was researching about this, and a lot of articles and posts kept coming on my social media because I'm part of a lot of these circles, is that I understood that at the core of it is a lot of frustration because a lot of people were losing their loved ones. They lost their jobs. They did not know what to do sitting at home. And all of that sort of got misdirected towards animals. Not just animals, there were a huge surge in domestic abuse cases. So
Hmm.
basically, what I think at the core of it was a lot of misdirected anger towards those who could not speak up amongst them, like for themselves. And at the bottom of that would be animals, because they anyway cannot speak for themselves, and this was the time when people were locked up in their houses and they did not have anything better to do. So I think a lot of that got redirected towards animals. That is one thing. In terms of all the street animals, as our community animals, what happened is that there was a lot of misconception going around that dogs and cats or any other animal is just randomly carrying around COVID
Hmm.
on them. So a lot of people were hitting them, trying to throw hot water at them, trying to chase them away from their societies because they did not want to get COVID. So I think a lot of it came from the way negatively media was also portraying half sort of researched information. So media is also to blame in the way that they portray things. It keeps happening even now. You can go online and check about how they would sort of the kind of words and adjectives they use every time there might be a stray dog biting incident. They sort of inflate and exaggerate everything, but whenever there
Hmm.
is an animal abuse issue, nobody reports it with the same amount of glory. So
Right.
it's also the way that things are being portrayed on media.
So like coming back to where we started, coexist with positivity.
Yeah.
So like while starting it, how did you feel like what will be your role to play? How are you going to bring an impact? Because you started it single handedly.
Yeah.
Starting something single handedly at such a great level and during tough times, how did you feel that you are going to bring a change?
So I never thought that I would get to the numbers that I am working with right now, because I obviously did not have any dedicated funds. And I was literally just asking my parents money every time I did a sterilization. And collecting back whatever I could, 50 or 60% of it. And I am so glad that my parents were able to help me back then, and even now they continue to help me. But the main aim behind that was, even if I can help. So it started with helping that family of 8 dogs, where two survived and there was the mother. So if I could even sterilize these 3 dogs, feed and vaccinate them, I am making an impact on the life of these 3 dogs. So it started with that aim, that let me try to focus on a certain population of dogs and cats that I can help in whatever small way. At least I would be helping them have a better life. But then obviously I got in touch with more people. I was able to help more animals, but always the aim was to help as little as I can, but do it to the fullest and do it as well as I can.
So a completely out of the blue question that I was very curious to know about was, so you have worked a lot with cats as well, right?
Yeah.
So even I have noticed on the streets as well that whenever you call a dog, they usually come up for cuddles and just inspecting in general. But cats,
Yeah.
they usually run away. So why is that?
Yeah. So, for this, I think I came across a quote which said that you can always judge the people of a village by the way their cats are. And I always, as a cat rescuer, who I was primarily a cat rescuer, and it's been almost 8 or 9 years that I've been working with cats. I always thought that cats are supposed to be skittish as well. But I had gone to Malaysia in 2019, and cats were almost, in fact, as cuddly as a dog. You would just whistle at them, or make a hand gesture, and they would come to you. So what I then realized is that the problem is with the people and not the animal. What happens in our country is that we are extremely prejudiced towards cats. People have a lot of
Hmm.
misconceptions and religious beliefs that cats are unholy or they bring bad luck. So we sort of try to shoo them away, and also we are not very accepting of the fact that cats are there around us. So we don't pet them, we are not very friendly with them. So that is one of the biggest facts why our cats are always hiding, and they are not very friendly and not trusting of human beings. Apart from that, cats as animals are naturally supposed to be nocturnal animals, so they're not very used to the traffic and the loud noise of the people around. So that makes them further more sort of, careful of being around humans. But one of the most beautiful things that I realized working with cats is that they sort of teach you to have a boundary. And that is why when you have a cat and a cat comes to you themselves to get petted, it's a very satisfactory feeling, because that means you have been accepted in their space. So it also gives you the idea that when you have a pet, you are a pet parent and you're not a pet owner, so you don't own them. And you have to respect their boundary just as much as you would respect the boundaries of another human being.
I feel that movies play a very negative role here, because whenever suspense or a witch laughing, they show a cat face just randomly, and
Yeah.
like people are scared just by the look of the cat. Even I have
Yeah.
seen in my street as well. Whenever they see a black cat, they are just terrified. They don't even
Yeah.
stand in close proximity of it. They just run away. I've seen them running literally. So I'm just
Yeah.
shocked to see that it's just an animal, just a different color. What's the big deal about
Exactly.
that?
Exactly. And this brings us back to the point we were talking about, the black dog and cat syndrome. So,
Right.
what happens is that all of these religious beliefs and misconceptions also lead to the fact of reduced adoption rates.
Hmm.
But what happens on the other hand is that whenever they are adopted, we have to do a doubly thorough check, because I have read reports of rescuers where they have lost black cats because people who adopted them seemed very good on paper, but once the cats were adopted, these people they did some religious performances and the cats were killed. So we have had horrific reports from rescuers where things have gone terribly wrong. Similarly with black dogs, a lot of people have approached me as well to adopt a black dog because their astrologer said so.
Right, right,
so
right.
so the biggest problem behind that motivation of adopting an animal because an astrologer said so is that you don't have the welfare of the animal at your heart. So you don't know exactly how to take care of that animal, and you have not thought out of that. But your own benefit is at the heart of that adoption. You want yourself to benefit because the astrologer might have told that you will become more richer, or nobody in your house is going to fall sick if you have a black dog. So I think that's a very wrong way of going ahead with adoption.
So another myth about cats in general, like you are free to bust any other myth as well. But the one that I've heard a lot, even in my family as well, is that keeping cat as a pet is not a very best good option, because cats usually run away. So there's no point keeping cats because eventually they're going to run away, and dogs are loyal. So what's your take on that?
So again, it's that thing. Cats are naturally very curious, and a lot of that running away also comes from the fact that people did not know a lot about sterilization very long ago, and cats are more agile animals. So if you had an unsterilized dog at your house, the most the dog could do at a heat season or when it wanted to mate is that it would go and cry at the door, but it cannot jump up balconies and run away. But a cat can very simply do that. It's the same urge, but it's a different animal and different amount of mobility that allows the cat to run away, but a dog does not. So I think it comes from a place of not being informed enough that to take care of a domesticated animal you should absolutely sterilize them, because it benefits the animal immensely. And also the fact that there is a specific way of handling cats. You should net your balconies, and you should definitely be careful of the doors, because they are very naturally curious animals. So if you are planning to domesticate them, you have to have a different set of expectations and different set of things that you need to take care of. But it's just that if you love them enough, you are going to do whatever it takes to keep them with you.
Right. Another out of the blue question I would love to ask. So I've seen many people feeding a dog or a cat. Like they start with a very good intent. They usually feed for a week or so, and
Yeah.
suddenly for XYZ reason, they stop feeding the animal.
Yeah.
What I feel, I'm not sure about it, is that it breaks the habit of an animal coming to that person at particular point of time and feeding.
Yeah.
So does it negatively affect the animal just breaking that habit suddenly, or do they
it
just
de-
skip to like foraging again for food?
So what I think is that here always there should be a balance. So when I also started feeding during lockdown, it was the first time that I was doing it at a very regular pace, because before this, when I used to stay in Delhi, there were rescuers who were working from the 80s and 90s. So I really did not ever have to go out myself and start any dog or cat on a feeding routine, because most of these dogs you would see around Delhi are very well fed because rescuers
Right.
have been working for much longer. But in NCR, the same amount of initiative and work was has not started yet, or is just starting. So what I researched at that time and came across posts from other rescuers was, and what I have also myself now, realized, is that there has to be a balance in the amount of food that you feed them. You cannot make them completely dependent on you, because obviously you should always think of a what if situation when you're taking care of
Hmm.
community animals. So you have to think about the fact that maybe some days you're going to be sick, so you cannot go out and feed them. There are going to be times where you have absolutely no funds to do anything, so you might have to give a break. So I feel the perfect balance is feeding just the bare minimum amount so that they are not starving as well, but also at the same time just one meal a day is enough, so that the rest of the time they can go out there and forage for themselves, scavenge for themselves. And that hunting instinct also stays alive, so that if tomorrow by chance you're not able to do something, the animal is not completely dependent on you and dies waiting for the food that you would have brought for
Right.
them. But at the same time, I would say, if you are starting feeding of a community animal, have a few backup plans in your head and try to follow through with the plan, because at the end of the day they are going to wait for you no matter how less you feed them,
Hmm.
because most of the time they just want your pet and your love as well along with the food, so they really just would be waiting for you.
Right. So another important aspect of your organization is rescuing, right? And you have rescued a lot of dogs and cats as well. So there are hundreds and thousands of the people whom I have personally noticed just pass by a dying animal, a rotting animal. Why do you think people do so? Like, why are people so ignorant?
So I think the few things that I have come across is that, first of all, people don't care enough for animals, so they think that it doesn't matter. There are already so many animals. What is the worst that could happen if a few die? That is the first mindset. Secondly, also there is not enough shaming in our society if a person does that to an
Hmm.
animal, so people don't want to take responsibility. But at the same place, if there was a human child that was injured, which was almost on the verge of dying, and if a person passed by, a newspaper or a media channel would be so quick to report on the number of people that passed by, or 10 other people would look around and feel embarrassed that they are not doing something. But the same amount of responsibility and feeling do not extend to animals. Secondly, people always think this idea that somebody else will do it, or in Hindi, like koi aur kar lega, I don't need to do it, I don't need to take responsibility of it. That's one of the main reasons that people do not come forward. In human accident cases, I still understand there are a lot of laws and legislations, and you do not want to get caught in the court
Right.
work, or keep going to the police station. But in an animal accident case, there is literally nobody that is going to hound you for details, or there are literally not enough laws for us to go behind you or to keep pestering you. Every rescuer will be thankful for any action that you take,
Hmm.
but that sense of let me do something is just not there. A lot of times what happens is, even if people are good enough to call a rescue service, and they call us to help the animal, they would disappear before we arrive at the scene. So what happens is that they would have sent us a rough location, and maybe the animal was injured but not injured enough to keep lying down. They might have crawled away somewhere or hidden away, and it takes us hours to locate the animal. In the meantime, the animal gets even more severely sick, because a lot of times these accident cases are lead to internal bleeding, and
Hmm.
slowly they are bleeding inside, so this is time that the animal do not have. So what I think is that it's just, at the end of the day, it's the lack of responsibility and the sense of that urgency that people have, or the feeling they have towards the animals.
So I would love to mention an instance that how I rescued my first bird. So it was a similar situation. So obviously people think that hens going through the street is just a common thing. It's just a
Hmm.
hen. Okay. So I was
Yeah.
just going on my street. It was a jam pack, and suddenly I felt something like picking on my leg. I saw down. It was just a small chick, and like the skin was exposed completely, so it wasn't dire state. And first of all, I hadn't touched any bird till that time. So I was like, just pass me something. How can I pick this thing? And just like gathered the courage, I picked it up, and fortunately it got treated. It lived for another year because what I got to know was that it was very much overfed with a lot of protein diet. So obviously a
Okay.
lot of protein intake led to an internal problem in the bird, and it couldn't survive for a lot of time, but it lived for an
Mhm.
year with me, and it used to study with me, and it used to like move with me. And even that was the first hen that I'd ever seen sleep in someone's lap. And it used and like randomly I'm sitting, it used to come and sit on my lap and just sleep. And that used to be like the most memorable moment, and that was also the time that I learned more about hens and the behavior that even they have. And believe me, that was the time that most of the people in my house, like, they didn't even touch chicken for a few months. They used to be like, no, like, it's the same species, we can't eat this thing. And
Yeah.
they avoided eating chicken. So I felt that how strong a small rescue can be, and how an animal can protect its species in so many ways. Just
Yeah.
looking at its affection, they felt that we shouldn't be eating this for now. So
Yeah.
I felt that it was great.
It's
So
that's a beautiful like rescue example. Like most of the people around me, they have been like their view about animals have changed similarly when they came across a post, or they came across an animal that was in a dire need and they did something, or even if they just saw. So I feel that interaction, or that pausing for 2 minutes and just really looking at the animal gives you so much of affection that people just need to understand that they have a lot to give. You just need to pause in your busy life like 2 minutes and just look at them and just look at the issues that they have.
exactly, like they have so many emotions. I've seen
Yeah.
that bird like just sit and look at me when I had fever, and it used to wait when I'm going to feed it. So I've seen like so much emotion just packed in a small hen, which is just
Yeah.
killed just like that because so many hens are
Yeah.
there.
Yeah.
So we are talking about rescues, right? And I feel like a very important issue, correct me if I'm wrong, is that many rescuers leave hope in Delhi, particularly to rescue an animal rotting on the side of the road, because we don't have a very sophisticated medical system, particularly for stray animals. And if it does exist, it's very expensive. So that day, even I was reading that the Municipal Corporation of Delhi is going to collaborate with the government, forming like small sections and committees in the government hospitals, particularly for the stray animals, and working with the local rescuers, the local NGOs. So I hope that that particularly improves the situation, because personally, I've never seen a very sophisticated medical surgery being done on a dog. Like whatever
Mm.
hospitals that I've particularly visited, they're very unhygienic, and if they were hygienic, they were charging like hell lot of money. So I
That's true.
particularly feel that the medical system needs to improve the condition of animals as well.
Yeah, that's absolutely true, because the issue right now on the ground is that rescuers unfortunately have to always seek out help from private hospitals and doctors, which is extremely expensive. Like you said, like even a night's boarding at many of these places would cost you upwards of 10K, which most of us rescuers do not have to spare because we are working with so many animals at a time. And the facilities at government hospitals and or shelters that are even run by private facilities are so overburdened, and they do not have any government fundings with them, that they are running at maximum capacity, and they do not have enough places to accommodate new cases. They do not have enough staff members to ensure safety and hygiene, which leads to more diseases. So most of the time I am mortified if I want to take help of any local shelter for low cost treatments, just because out of that fear, a treatment that I could have gotten for 200 rupees, I need to go to a private hospital and get it for 1200 rupees, almost 10 times more. So that is the issue with most of the places we have, not just in Delhi. Imagine Delhi is the capital, so the rest of the country is even in a worse shape than this. So definitely, like collaborating and more government fund being dissipated to more smaller organizations or shelters and clinic would help a lot of rescuers who are working in this field.
So since we talked about rescue, I completely understand that each and every rescue is tough and inspiring in its own way. But if I had to ask you that about that one rescue story that was very tough and inspiring at the same time for you.
Um, so very it was tough, as in it was very emotionally toll taking on me. It was a very short rescue case because it did not happen over a huge amount of time, but it was literally in a span of a week. So I had recently joined the organization that I currently also work with for adoptions, called Pause for a Cause, and we help coordinating adoptions for other people who have maybe rescued an animal but do not know how to go through with the process of adoption, of reaching out to enough people, what are the adoption checks to be taken place. So I got this case of a dachshund that was rescued by someone. So this person had already told me when I took over the case that they have very limited amount of resource and they won't be able to take care of the animal for a longer period of time. So this was a 10-year-old dachshund that was first of all abandoned at the age of 10, which is extremely distressing for the animal. He was found lying in a very crowded market area where the other dogs, community dogs, were hounding him because obviously he was new to the territory and he was old and he was slow. And this person came across the dog, and so she took the dog in and she took him home, but obviously did not have enough funds and money to
Hmm.
take care of the dog. So I immediately posted about him, and because obviously he's a breeded dog, he got more than 25 to 30 responses within 2 to 3 days. First of all, sifting through those number of responses were a difficult task in itself. So I went through that and I scheduled a series of house check, which is the second step for an adoption procedure. After a person has filled a form, we make sure that we get on a call, or if it's possible to physically go to someone's house and have a sit down conversation with all the family members to ensure that everybody is on board. So even if you're doing it virtually, every house check can take almost an hour or so, because you have to talk to everybody and you have to sort of answer all the questions that they have. You might have some questions as a rescuer. I did that within a span of the next 2 days. I screened almost 25 homes and I found the perfect home for the dog. And after I found the perfect place, I forwarded the response to the rescuer, because at the end of the day, the rescuer has the animal and they need to approve the house for us. And that's when the rescuer tells me that they have randomly abandoned the dog at a shelter and they do not know where that shelter is. And it was so emotionally distressing for me, because I had exams coming up, I had assignments piling up, but I had put all of that on hold, and I was like, this dog needs to go home because he has already had enough of being abandoned at such a old age. um, I got extremely frustrated, and I started asking her that if she can tell me anything about the shelter. So she just gave me this much information, that it was under a flyover somewhere in South Delhi. I am so bad with directions, but luckily this is one shelter that I've worked with so much, and I immediately knew which place it was. And so I contacted this shelter, and I came to know that in fact the person who coordinates rescue from the shelter's end is also someone that I know. So I got in touch with her. I requested the adoption lead that we are extremely apologetic, but the dog you wanted to adopt has now randomly been dropped at a shelter, so now you need to coordinate with the shelter. And this person was extremely nice and cooperative, so she coordinated with the shelter staff, and they approved her because they liked her form and the house as much as I did, and the dog was at his new home within another week. That was one of the happiest moments of my life, but like also it was extremely challenging, because I had just started out doing adoptions for dogs, and I just started working with an organization. So obviously I had too many thoughts going on in my head, if I did something wrong, or if I should have acted more fast. But yeah, that was definitely a lesson to be learned.
So, like, a thing that bothers me and confuses me at the same time is that there are a lot of organizations working for community animals, and in the past year, after particularly COVID, they have increased a lot. But still, we hear a lot of animal cruelty cases. But I just want to ask you, are the numbers towering down or are they still increasing?
So what I have understood is that a lot of times, even though I respect all rescuers and I know most of the time these intentions are coming from a good place, but somewhere along the line, a lot of the intentions also get sort of misguided. I know a lot of people who are just doing the work because they want recognition. A lot of people are doing the work because unfortunately the funds can be also used in a way that cannot really be proven. So even though I am somebody who fundraises themselves, it is very disheartening when funds, anyways, people do not donate for animal welfare,
Hmm.
but when a few handful of those people do donate and the funds are being used in a wrong way, it very negatively affects the work that is already being done at a very limited scale. Secondly, a lot of these rescues, even though a lot of people have come up and are working, the number of people working versus the number of people that do not like animals are unfortunately still a very disproportionate amount. And no matter how many people that continue to work, I think as long as a basic animal affection and taking care of community animals or just understanding about them is not included in our education system in some way or the other, this will continue happening. We do not have the basic knowledge we should about animals around us, and India should have a very specific plan or a guide to include this in the education system, um, because the western countries do not need it. They do not have animal community animals. They do not have the same amount of human animal conflicts that India has. So we need some way or the other to teach people how to live with these animals, and how to behave better around them or with them.
So, I personally feel that the most common excuse that people have for not helping animals is that we are very busy. So, if
Yeah.
I had to ask you three tips that even the most busiest person can include in their routine
Yeah.
to help the community animals, what will those three tips be?
My first tip would be, if you cannot help, it's okay, don't help, but do not contribute to the problem. Do not sort of go around encouraging abuse. Do not keep forwarding researched articles on WhatsApp groups which say that this animal, dogs are dangerous, dogs are biting. Please see the reason and the rationale behind what you are doing, because you might not go out and beat a dog today after seeing an article, but that one forward might enrage somebody who is already against dogs and sort of you know uh, initiate a series of events where it ends up with an animal being hurt or abused. So that is first thing. Secondly, as a rescuer, what can help me more is that even if my posts have more visibility so that I can reach more people, even if I don't get enough funds, that's all right, but even if the information goes out there about the work that is being done, and what is the kind of things you can do to help an animal, just help us by liking a post or just sharing it across. That helps a lot, because a lot of work right now is being done virtually since COVID. A lot of it is out there on social media, so even if you help a rescuer just by forwarding their post, it would be extremely we'll be grateful for that. And lastly, when we are fundraising, we honestly don't need huge amount, but even if 10 people could give 10 rupees, that would be more than enough for a rescuer to help any animal. So it's really that bare minimum. If you can do for us, that's more than enough, to be honest.
Another question that just came to my mind was that recently I saw a video where a person was taking his pit bull like for a walk, and suddenly that pit bull like, got hold of a street dog. The street dog was like in dire conditions, blood coming, wounds. So what why do you think like this particular incident happened, and how can the owner be more aware of such situations?
So I feel in most of these cases, what happens is, again, the misguided attitude which comes from buying an animal. Because when in most of these cases, people have bought an animal, and when they do so, there is no put out thought behind how to take care of an animal, how to train the animal, or any awareness about the breed. So that is the biggest issue. When you do not have these three basic knowledge, you are obviously going to have a pet at your hand who is not going to be adequately trained. The energy is not going to be adequately used according to the breed. That's what leads to more cases of biting. That is what will lead to the animal being then abandoned, and the cycle of animal ending up at the shelter and either dying or staying at the shelter for years before the animal finds a home. So at the crux of it is that take an informed decision when you take an animal home, which I believe can only come from adoption and not from buying an animal. Because when you are buying an animal, the shopkeeper is somebody who is benefiting from it and is never going to give you the whole scenario about the animal's behavior, about the animal's health or anything else. But when you take an animal from an adoption agency or from a rescuer, we literally don't stand anything to get, like we are not gaining anything from giving you the animal. We are doing everything for free. We are taking the charge of, vaccinating the animal and even sterilizing them if they are of age. So that is one of the first things. Secondly, always sterilize a household animal, because a lot of the anger and aggression comes from not sterilizing your animals. Because obviously during heat season, during mating season, they would be aggressive, they would want to guard their resources and their territory. And lastly, I think a lot of people need to learn how to leash walk their animals, and if the animal is reactive, to sort of put a muzzle, which is a humane muzzle, the ones that allow them enough space to breathe, but at the same time do not pose a danger to other dogs or to other people that are walking around. Because seriously, pit bulls are honestly one of the breeds which are so misunderstood that we do not need more of these cases to sort of feed into that misconception. So people need to be more responsible when they are with their companion animals, because they have other things, there are other beings in the environment which need to be also considered when you're walking your pet.
Yeah, also I feel that people need to consider the breed they are buying. Obviously, a Rottweiler will not behave like a Labrador, because at
Exactly.
its core, a Rottweiler is a guard dog. Obviously, the
Yeah,
energy it has, it is way more than a Labrador. But I
exactly.
feel that people need to understand it does not make a Rottweiler a very vicious animal. Obviously,
Yeah.
if trained properly, if walked properly, if given enough space to like exert its energy, it's obviously going to be a great dog.
Yeah, that's exactly it. Like when people are buying, that's the main issue. They are not thinking about their decision, they are only taking something that is aesthetically pleasing to their eyes. It's black in color, it looks a certain way, it walks a certain way, maybe this is the best dog for me. I go to the gym, I'm a gym buff, this dog matches my this thing personality, so I want this dog with me. But that is not how you go and choose human beings, right? Whenever you choose a partner for yourself, that's not what you do. Whenever you are thinking about adopting a baby, that's not what you do. It has to be a more well informed and thought about decision. So first of all, that acquiring knowledge about the breed that you are getting for yourself. And also secondly, training. People think that if they are getting a breed, the breed is automatically just going to fit into all the boxes as it is, even though we are all homo sapiens, we are all not the same, right? Every human being is different. Similarly, even if my rottweiler is a certain way, my friend's rottweiler is not going to behave the certain way, because obviously my house has different stimulus and a different environment, different kind of food, different kind of training that I am providing versus what my friend is providing. They also need to understand that every animal is different. It all depends on how you work with the animal and how you are trying to understand them. They cannot understand you, and they are not as complex as a human being. You are the more complex
Hmm.
individual in this equation, so you need to understand their needs.
Okay, so nearing the end of the podcast, a question that I love to ask, and will obviously be asking each and every guest that comes to this show, is going to be a last message or advice for anyone who has lost hope. Maybe a person who has believed that an animal, as a street animal's destiny is to rot and just be on the road. So, what will be that one message or advice for that person to have that hope again to do the needful for these innocent animals?
So what I think is that I would like to give a two message. Firstly, for the people who have not cared about a street animal before, to pay a little more attention to what is around them, who is around them. Maybe you might find your next companion animal out there, or your next purpose out there. And for people who are already working or were working with community animals and have lost hope, I can understand that myself, because as a rescuer, a lot of times you have what is called as rescuer fatigue. You feel that whatever you're doing is not enough, it is not impacting enough lives out there. But trust me, even if you have worked with 10 animals, you have changed their life for the better. And you have made a difference in their life. So always look at it from a micro level. Do not always try to think that at a macro level you have not been able to make a change. Sure, maybe you have not been able to make a change today, but even if you got one dog sterilized, you have stopped 10,000 more dogs being
Hmm.
born out there without food, without resources, being killed under cars or anything like that. So yeah.
So thank you so much, Kirtana, for doing this. It was a great podcast. Obviously, I don't know for others, but it was a great learning for particularly for me. So thank you so much for doing this. It's a pleasure to have you. Thank you.
Same here, thank you for calling.